In this video, I'm going to share with you why short-term chaos equals a long-term win. Okay. Many times we are running around trying to prevent chaos that is mostly initiated as a result of the other parent, right? And we're trying to either prevent our kids from suffering or, prevent ourselves from having to deal with disruption and chaos or whatever the case may be. We're trying to keep things running smoothly for everybody, the child, us, all of those things. And a lot of times we are actually hurting our own case by doing that. And this is something that I see clients do a lot. So I think that you are going to find that this video resonates with you. Before we dive further into the topic, let me just remind you, if you're watching me on YouTube, don't forget to hit like on this video and also subscribe to the channel so that you get notified as new videos are released. What do I mean by short-term chaos equals long-term win? When you have the other parent who changes things, alters things, schedules things without telling you, whatever the case may be. And I see this happen with everything from doctor's appointments to school enrollment to camp signups to therapy to whatever it is. Okay. The other parent will either change the appointment or will be afraid they're going to do something. We'll be afraid they're going to try to enroll them in a different school, or we'll be afraid that they're going to put them in this camp that interferes with a camp that we already enrolled them in, or whatever the case may be. And honestly, when you try to preempt those things and you kind of succeed in throwing enough of a deterrent in there to stop it, what happens a lot of times is you end up not getting the evidence you need for court. And I know that seems kind of weird, but it's like people go in and they go, well, the other parent tried to do this thing. And then it's like, okay, but you stopped it, so it didn't happen. So there was no harm because nothing happened. So what are you complaining about? And they tried to move it and you thwarted that. So you're both participating in the back and forth and the conflict. So you're both doing things. That's kind of what happens in the court's eyes. And I always tell people that, when you let things happen in the short term, is it going to cause chaos? Maybe. Is your child going to not be in the school you want them in for that 1 year? Maybe. Is your child going to miss a camp? Maybe. Will you have to reschedule the doctor's appointment? Maybe. Okay. But, is that chaotic for you? Yes. Yes, it definitely is. But then what does that do? That gives you evidence that the other parent actually did this thing, right? It wasn't something they just threatened. And especially with a narcissistic person, I see this a lot where they will threaten to do something and then we intervene in some way and then it doesn't happen. But in reality, they probably weren't going to follow through and do it anyway. A lot of times I see that. If they are going to follow through and do it, once they do it, you actually have the evidence. Then you're not going into court and saying, look, I'm afraid this person's going to do this, or I think this person's going to do this, or this person has done this in the past, right? Which to us all feel like justifiable reasons for things. But the court tends to go on what's actually happening, not what happened before, not what happened last time. I mean, not that there isn't something to be said for patterns of behavior. There obviously is. But the court wants to look at what those patterns that are actually happening are. And if you don't let that chaos happen, then you don't have proof that that's the chaos that the other person was creating. You're actually shoring things up just enough to where the crap doesn't hit the fan because you're cleaning up the mess before it ever happens. And a much better approach is to let the crap happen. Let it show up so that then you can say, look, here's the chaos that this created for the child. Now the court's looking at the other parent going, why are you doing stupid things that are creating chaos for the child? Right? As opposed to you cutting it off at the pass. And then it's like, well, they were going to try to. Well, yeah, but then you fixed it. So then no big deal, right? Because we don't really know what would have for sure happened because it didn't happen. This is why you have to let the chaos happen. Now, I'm going to try to give you a little example here that will hopefully make sense. So, I had a client recently who had a child under 5 who was enrolled in preschool, okay? And I've actually had 2 clients that this has happened to, where the child was enrolled in preschool. And what happened is the other parent went and enrolled the child in another preschool. So the child is going to 2 different preschools now. Okay. Now, initially, both of these clients were like, I got to do something. I got to call the school and tell them they're already in this preschool and they can't. And there's 2 and that one's further away and blah, 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 blah. And I said, no, we're not going to do that. Like, what? It's like, but then my child's going to have to go to 2 different preschools. Uh-huh. And that may be the chaos that we have to deal with in the short term. And I have, one client where the issues aren't resolved yet. So I don't know what the outcome of that's going to be. But in my other client that had this issue, what happened ultimately is the child got placed in my client's preschool permanently. And that client got school placement for the child once the child enrolls in full-time kindergarten. That was a huge win. Now they've had a few months of chaos of back and forth, 2 preschools. You can imagine pickups, drop-offs, the other parents picking up, the other parents dropping off, blah, blah, blah. Are they going to this school today, that school today? It was a lot of chaos at a lot of times. But that few months of that chaos has now resulted in that parent having permanent school placement moving forward, not just in the preschool, but in the regular, elementary school stage when it happens. That's huge. That's a huge amount of control and a huge advantage in having that. And so it resulted in that parent also having the majority of the parenting time because now the school placement is on their end and the parents live, about an hour apart. Perfect example of how putting up with that little bit of chaos in the short term. And again, I know it can be really painful, but it really gave this person an advantage in the long term. And so what you have to do is kind of think to yourself when these things happen, because when that issue comes up, it's emotional, right? As soon as my client found out that the other parent was trying to enroll them in a second preschool, that client was very upset and very angry, about the whole situation and wanted to react, wanted to intervene right then and call the other school and say that the other parent doesn't have permission to do this. And I said, we're going to let this play out. I think we should let this play out. And here's why. And I tried to walk that client through logically why we wanted to do that and to let it happen. Not knowing for sure if it's going to pay off. You can't always, predict everything that's going to happen, but it definitely gave proof that the other parent was not focused on what was best for the child. The other parent was focused on what was convenient for them. Now I've got arguments that, you didn't put the child first. You disrupted the child's routine. You're more concerned with your own, perspective than what's going on with the child, all that kind of stuff. So that just gives you, advantage on every front straight off the bat. But again, you're going through 3 or 4 months of chaos because you got the kid going back and forth to different preschools and all this kind of thing, right? So really step back from the emotional part of it and think, okay, what kind of evidence am I trying to gather for court? What am I trying to show the court that this parent is doing? What am I trying to expose them for? And whatever you're trying to expose them for, you have to actually let happen so that you can get the goods. Okay. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. It can be a little bit counterintuitive. And again, when you're the emotional one, sometimes it's hard to see these things. And that's why having, that non-emotional person outside yourself, a coach or somebody that can kind of help you and give you that reality check can be a huge advantage in your case. So if you'd like more help from me, you can go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. There's information on that page on my group coaching programs for moms and for dads. And there's also information on my one-on-one VIP coaching services. If you have a little bit more complicated case, or you just feel like you need that higher level of support, you just got it coming from you at all angles, that might be the program that would fit you better. So go check those out, and I will see you guys next time.
We'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the horizon, turn us to